One of the things I like best about Star Wars is the iconic characters. Who could forget R2-D2's blue and white, and gray and yellow and red color scheme, or C-3PO's glowing blue nipples, or how Chewbacca used to DJ on Disco Night on the Millennium Falcon. If you're having trouble remembering some of these versions of the characters, then you must not be familiar with unlicensed Star Wars ceramics. You see, in the 70s and 80s, small do-it-yourself ceramic stores could be found all around the country. You could pick from a variety of sculpts and then paint and customize it yourself. The designs tended to be unlicensed versions of popular movie and TV characters, and naturally there were many Star Wars characters as well, or at least Star Wars-inspired characters. Ron Salvatore wrote a great article about this phenomenon on the Star Wars Collector's Archive, so if you want to know more about these, I highly suggest you check the link in the description below. Sometimes these pieces were turned into proper lamps, like this Vader or this Yoda. Sometimes they were only lamps in the loosest sense of the word, basically a string of Christmas lights shoved into the bottom of a ceramic figure. From a collector's standpoint, there's a lot to like about these things. Not only are many of them just straight-up bizarre, but each one of them is also unique. It's not uncommon to see the same sculpt used in many different ways, from this jeweled psychedelic wicket to this middle-aged wicket that was apparently the victim of multiple gunshots. This one had been turned into a music box, by the way. Of course, being a huge fan of Jabba the Hutt, I was very interested to see how his character had been interpreted. As far as I know, there was only one sculpt made. This version of it looks relatively normal, although Jabba looks like he's been hitting the Starbucks a little too frequently. It's been signed on the bottom by an M. Myers. Wait a minute. Michael Myers? Mike Myers? I'm not sure which is scarier. Okay, I know the spelling is different, but still. I have one more of these in my collection, and actually I'm surprised it wasn't the one made by Michael Myers. Yeah, it's kind of terrifying. I'm not sure if they intentionally left the eyes empty or not. Maybe they wanted to use it as a lamp or something. You know, it might look less scary with a nice warm light shining in it. No, that's much worse. Much worse. I originally wanted to try and make a mini collection of these ceramic figures, since they're all unique, but I've only been able to find these two. However, I was able to find this, one of the original molds used to make these figures in the 1980s. It's a two-part mold, into which liquid ceramic material would have been poured. Of course, it would have been used upside down. It's made of plaster and is extremely heavy. As you can see here, the figures fit perfectly into the mold. When I found this, I thought it would be a cool idea to use this mold to make a modern edition of these figures. But unfortunately, I know very little about ceramics, and I have no kiln. Also, I was afraid of possibly damaging the mold in the process, so I gave up on the idea for a while. But I recently got a 3D printer, and that got me to thinking. I wondered if it wasn't possible to make a 3D scan of the items and make copies of them that way. As it turns out, Autodesk makes an app called 123D Catch that does exactly what I needed. You just take a bunch of pictures of an object, you shouldn't actually have it on a white background like this, but I'm just showing you, and the app uploads them to the cloud, where they are turned into a 3D model. Here's what it looked like on the 123D Catch website. As you can see, it captured all sorts of other things around the figure, but the figure itself looks pretty great. Then I opened up the file in a program called Mesh Mixer to get rid of the extra objects I didn't need and clean it up a bit, like making the bottom flat and making it face the right way up. I'm not going to go through the whole process here, but you get the idea. Once I had the 3D model, I had to open it in a slicer, which is a program that slices it up so that it can be printed on a 3D printer. Here you can see all the individual layers that will be printed. Finally, I printed it on the printer. It gradually builds up the figure using very thin lines of melted plastic. I think this took around 8 or 10 hours to finish, and that's by no means the longest model I've made. 3D printing is still a rather time-consuming process. And finally, here is the finished figure. I printed it in gold because this figure reminds me of an ancient idol straight out of Indiana Jones, but of course you can use any color or even paint it if you want. It's smaller than the original because my printer won't print any bigger than this, but other printers could make it the same size or even much larger. I've uploaded the file to Thingiverse, which is a site full of free models for 3D printing, so now anyone in the world with access to a 3D printer can have their very own copy of the original sculpture. The link is in the description below. I'd love to see what other people do with this model. I think it's the perfect modern equivalent to the do-it-yourself ceramic projects from the 1980s. Thanks for watching, and be sure to post a picture on Thingiverse if you happen to print this off yourself.